Welcome to another episode of Stories of World War II Veterans. My name is Kayleen Reusser, and each week I will read to you a story from one of the books I've written all about men and women that I have interviewed. I have interviewed 260 World War II vets. Today's story comes from my World War II Legacies Book 2. They did it for honor. Stories of American World War II veterans. So today's story is about Dick Girocco, who served in the Navy. At 0800 hours on Sunday, December 7th of 1941, a cacophony of unfamiliar noises caused Seaman Second Class Richard Dick Girocco and other seamen from his PBY squadron, which stands for patrol bomber, to run outside their aviation hangar on Ford Island in Hawaii. Ordinarily, the seamen would be just awakening for the day from their bunks. Today, they had been ordered to rise early to prepare to move equipment from Pearl Harbor to Perth, Australia. The sight of planes in the sky didn't immediately alarm the seamen. "We thought the Army Air Corps was dropping flour sacks for practice," said Girocco. As he and the others continued to gaze upward, however, they noticed with growing dismay machine gun fire erupting from the planes. They quickly realized the planes were not part of the Allied forces, but Japanese Imperial forces. Their pilots were firing on them and everything else on Ford Island. Pearl Harbor was under attack. Girocco's first impulse on that sunny Sunday morning was that his life was in danger. He wanted to run back inside the hangar. Realizing that would expose him as a target, he chose a closer means of rescue. Several feet of pipe lay close by, part of a project the Navy had begun of transporting water from the coast to the hangars. Upon landing at the U.S. territory of Hawaii in November of 1941, Girocco, a native of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, had thought he was in paradise. There was lots of green, water, and sand, he said. Remember that the Republic of Hawaii became the Territory of Hawaii to the U.S. in 1898. It wasn't until 1959 that the residents of Hawaii voted in favor of statehood, making Hawaii the 50th U.S. state. Prior to enlisting in the Navy, Girocco had worked for the Civilian Conservation Corps for 6 months at a forestry camp in Wisconsin. "I earned $30 a month," he said. "The Navy supplied me with everything I needed, so I sent $22 home for my family." After completing basic training at Great Lakes Naval Training Center in Chicago, Girocco attended aviation machinist school at Puget Sound Naval Shipyard in Seattle. In Hawaii, he was transferred to a duty station aboard the USS Saratoga, patrolling the Hawaiian Islands. Scrambling inside the section of pipe, Girocco watched in horror as a series of bombs hit the USS Shaw. The destroyer had been sitting in the Navy Yard dry dock. When the ship exploded, Girocco was sent flying, landing hard in a nearby ditch. "I couldn't see anything after that, but heard the noise and felt the concussion on the ground," he said. When Japanese bombers set off ammunition in Hangar 6, naval personnel were again in shock. "It seemed all we could do was wait for instructions from anyone," he said. Few people knew what to do. Prior to attacking Pearl Harbor, Japanese Imperial Navy aircraft had bombed the nearby U.S. Naval Air Station on the east coast of Oahu. As a result, 27 Catalina PBY seaplanes, known as flying boats, were damaged and unable to go on attack. "This was devastating, as they could have followed the attackers as a defensive maneuver," said Girocco. U.S. personnel returned fire with anything they could lay hands on during the attack, from anti-aircraft guns to pistols. They scored some victories, including the crash of a Zero plane at Fort Kamehameha After 30 minutes, though, quiet descended, only to be interrupted at 08:45 by the second wave of bombers and fighters that resumed the destruction. By 09:45, the last Japanese plane was heading north over the sea. Navy personnel quickly set to work trying to establish order. A hangar was made into quarters, and a barracks along Battleship Row was converted to a hospital for shrapnel wounds and other injuries. The attack had lasted less than 2 hours, but in that time Japan had inflicted terrible losses on American forces. A total of 2,403 Americans died, were wounded, or missing in the attack on Pearl Harbor and the events that surrounded that. That number included 49 civilians, ranging in age from 3 months to 66 years. 3 were found dead in a car pierced by shrapnel from a Japanese bomb. They were not near any military target. The vessels along Battleship Row had been devastated, all of them either sunk or badly damaged. The raiders had cut a wide swath through the Army and Navy aircraft on Oahu, destroying 188 and damaging another 159. The Japanese had lost only 29 planes and 55 men. For days, the uninjured, like Girocco, looked for survivors in the oil-filled waters. "We did rescue flights with PBYs," he said. "They could land on water and retrieve survivors." As news about the unmitigated attack spread to Washington, D.C. and other parts of the U.S., many Americans searched maps, as most had no idea where or what Pearl Harbor was. No matter its location, the response was certain. On December 8, 1941, American President Franklin D. Roosevelt declared war on the Axis powers of Japan, Italy, and Germany. Dick Girocco remained in his PBY squadron, fighting the war until October 1943, when he contracted malaria. After being released from the hospital, he was transferred to a different assignment. When the war ended, he re-enlisted in the Navy, retiring in 1960. Over the years, he visited Hawaii often. In 1987, Girocco made the decision to move to the state he thought of as paradise on December 7th, 1941. As an octogenarian, he served as an active volunteer at the Pacific Aviation Museum, Pearl Harbor. "The attack on Pearl Harbor was the most difficult part of my military experience," he said. "I'm encouraged by the number of young visitors who show interest in our nation's military history. I'm proud of our country and what we did to save it on December 7th, 1941. Here's a picture of Dick Girocco, who we've been hearing about. Thanks for listening today. I hope that you will subscribe to this channel and tell others to tune in. I appreciate you listening, and I'll see you next week.